Dwayne Haskins was benched, right? Ron Rivera benched him. They're moving on from Haskins, basically, at least for the time being. How do you feel about Dwayne Haskins getting benched? Do you believe in him going forward, or you think it's pretty much over for him?
I really like Dwayne Haskins, the guy. I don't know about him as a quarterback. I feel like he has been in a less severe Sam Darnold situation where he hasn't been surrounded by the talent that you would like your rookie quarterback to flourish in. His coaching has been shaky. His offensive line has been hit and miss. His weapons have been okay. He's had a guy like Terry McLaurin, but, it's never been all there for him in that offense. And overall, not the Redskins, the Washington football team, now the Washington football team, formerly the Redskins when he was drafted, have been dysfunctional. And so that will never be a recipe for success for a rookie quarterback. I don't know if he has the tools because I don't feel like he's been given that fair shake, just like I said for Sam Darnold. But I really like him as a guy, and I think that he has those leadership skills that are necessary for a very good quarterback. But can he put it all together? I think that he showed a little bit of immaturity on his hypothetical way out in Washington. He hasn't been dealt yet, but he's almost got 1 foot out the door, and I don't like the way he's handled it. But you look at a situation like, week 1, when Ron Rivera had to go and get treatment during halftime, and he couldn't give a speech, and Dwayne Haskins, without being prompted, gives the halftime speech. They come out in the second half and win the football game. I think he has that it factor that you want from a leader. It's just he has to mature a little bit and put it together on the football field. But I don't think that it would be dumb for a team like what the Saints did with Jameis Winston, who have an established quarterback, and bring in a solid backup to learn behind Drew Brees, something like that. I think it would be wise for a team with a good quarterback to bring him in to be that next step. And I don't know where that is, but I think he can flourish in the right situation.
I'm done with Dwayne Haskins. I'm done with him. I don't even think he's comparable to Sam Darnold in terms of the talent level. In Ohio State, he was babied in the offense. You got an offense with Terry McLaurin, who's the number 1 wide receiver now. Paris Campbell was like a first-round pick at the time. I mean, Ohio State was a loaded team, and they even babied him. Urban Meyer, in the draft process, said Dwayne is not ready. He needs to learn a couple years, right? And we're seeing that right now. I mean, he doesn't know the offense. He doesn't know where his checkdowns are. And, like, for me, and quite frankly, he's just an arrogant, cocky player/person. So when you said that you like Dwayne as a person, that's your opinion. But for me, I really don't, because I feel like he's arrogant and he thinks he's better than he is. And I feel like players like that don't usually succeed in the NFL. And I think that's a product of like social media with all these highlight clips that are coming out of you, all these comments and likes, people saying that you're the best, you're all this, you're all that, you're going to be, a Hall of Fame legend or whatever. It got to his head, and I don't just say this because I just don't like Dwayne Haskins. I say this because of evidence that has come out of Washington, right? So Grant Paulson, who's an insider for the Washington football team, he said Dwayne Haskins was bragging about his stat sheet after a loss against the Ravens. He threw for 300 yards, his first 300-yard game in his career, but they lost to the Ravens, and quite frankly, he had a bad game, even though the stats show he didn't play horrible, right? Then Thomas Davis, an all-pro, Pro Bowl player that played in Carolina with Ron Rivera in training camp. Dwayne Haskins was staring down his receiver, and Thomas Davis had the opportunity to knock out this receiver because he knew Dwayne was staring at him. Thomas Davis goes to the coaches and says, you better tell Dwayne to stop staring down these receivers because these guys are going to get seriously hurt, right? They go back on the field. Thomas Davis pulls Dwayne to the side and says, hey, you got to stop staring, bro. You got to stop staring. And Dwayne just shrugs it off like an all-pro isn't talking to him, like an NFL vet isn't talking to him. Like, he shrugs it off like, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm doing, So I feel like players like that, it isn't a recipe for success. I just feel like players that are arrogant and think they're better than they are, they're not coachable. And I think Dwayne Haskins is not coachable. We're talking about a guy in Ron Rivera who had Cam Newton, who recognizes talent, who's been a coach of the year. If Ron Rivera says, basically gives up on Dwayne Haskins 3 weeks into the year, then I think, yeah, there is a problem there. And Kyle Allen, he may not be the best option, right? But he showed flashes last year. And I think Alex Smith at this point, because he doesn't turn over the ball, is like their best option. People were enamored with Dwayne Haskins coming out of college. I know the Giants wanted him. They wanted him at that pick.
He wouldn't have succeeded in New York either.
No, at all.
Because the same problems that they have in Washington are the same problems they have in New York.
As bad as Daniel Jones has been this year, he was still the right pick. He was still the right pick if they were picking a quarterback, because nobody knew about Gardner Minshew at all, right? He was the right pick because Dwayne Haskins is worse than Daniel Jones. And, you know, I don't see, with all these teams that are looking for a successor in quarterback, right? I don't see Dwayne Haskins being that guy that teams really want to, you know, give a lot of compensation for. Sam Darnold, he's a guy that Colts are going to come knocking on the door. The Steelers are going to come knocking. Maybe even the Bears. There's suitors for Darnold because you see those flashes from Darnold. Darnold says all the right things in the media. He's a quiet guy. Dwayne Haskins, he's kind of an arrogant guy. And most of that is because he's young. He's only like, 22 or 23 years old, so he can grow out of that. But today, in this moment, he's immature.
I also don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing to have in a player. I think that it's bad. I think it's good in moderation, and I think you need to know how to control that. And like you said, he's still young and immature, and he needs to hone that in. But I think that you look at some of the best players in football right now, and you ask any of them, and they're going to say they believe they're the best, even if they're clearly not. You know, I think everybody knows Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. But if you ask Deshaun Watson who he thinks the best quarterback in the NFL is, I guarantee you he's saying Deshaun Watson or thinking Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that's true. But also, most of that is like behind the scenes. I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
When it gets to a point that you're in the locker room and you show arrogance towards your teammates and you shrug off an NFL veteran that wants you to learn, you're only 22, this guy's 35, 36, and you shrug it off like you know more than him, I think then it becomes a problem because it's not that your arrogance is giving you better performance on the field. Your arrogance is just making you uncoachable, unable to deal with criticism.
Yeah, and I think that is the immaturity, and he needs to get away from that. And I think that can come in the right system, but is he going to find that spot? You know, you look at a guy like Josh Rosen, who wasn't successful in his first year and now has floated around. He's in Tampa Bay right now. Will he ever get the second shot? It's the question now that I ask about Dwayne Haskins. I'm asking myself about Sam Darnold. If Haskins ends up being traded, which I think he's going to by the deadline, all signs point to it, is he going to get that second shot somewhere? And is it going to be the right fit? I would like to see him in a situation like the Steelers or the Colts that have a developed offense, a quarterback that he can learn behind. And although I like Ron Rivera, another good head coach in a better situation, to see if he can grow through that, I think that he has what it takes to make it, but he needs to hone it in. He needs to be behind a good quarterback who's been around the block. Maybe Detroit with Matt Stafford, a guy who's been a very skilled quarterback and not had much success, I think can be a perfect guy to help him get it in check. But I think that he needs that system around him, and he can grow through it. It all depends on where he ends up landing.
And you mentioned Josh Rosen. I think that's a perfect example because, I mean, Josh Rosen's first NFL moment was saying something really arrogant, right? Like, oh, every team that passed up on me is like they made a huge mistake, right? So arrogance works for some players, and when it works out, we always say, oh, man, this guy was like a believer in himself. But when it doesn't, Josh Rosen, Dwayne Haskins kind of guy, you look like you should have never probably said that. You know, I think sometimes it's better to remain humble, especially within the media and the public eye. Like if behind the scenes, you can be as cocky as you want to be because nobody's noticing. But when the cameras are on, you got to kind of not show that side of you, right? You have to kind of be more to yourself so people don't have a bad impression of you because, in my opinion, I think impressions are everything, especially making first ones when you get to a new team. I think those impressions last.
And I think that you hit on it. The winners write history. So you make a statement like that at the draft, like Josh Rosen, you better go out and play very well. And if you don't, you're going to be labeled as a fool. And if you do, like you said, it's going to be labeled as, man, he believed in himself, and that confidence is why he was so good. If you're going to make statements like that, you got to back it up with your play, and that is what Haskins has been lacking. Let's see if he can put it together.